You guys coming. Uh, we was asked to come and share a short sermon and probably kind of like our testimony of how we got saved. My testimony is a little different than some people. You know, I grew up in church. I got saved when I was probably around 7 or 8. I don't really remember a whole lot about it. I remember asking my mom in her bedroom when I was little, what it took to be saved and what being saved meant. And that's about all I remember from that. And then I remember the day I got baptized, there was a neighbor kid that lived down the road from us that got baptized the same day. And that's about all I remember from that. Growing up, I always went to church on Sunday mornings, Sunday nights, one on Wednesday nights. I always did VBS, church camps. I actually went to a church school my whole life through like preschool to graduation. So I grew up in church. There was a thing in school where we learned scriptures. We had to memorize them and repeat them, and these were 15 to 20 verse scriptures. Sometimes they were whole chapters that we'd have to memorize, and like every month we would have a new one. And the way it would work is if we memorized it word for word, we got 500 merits. And every time after that we could recite it was 250 merits. You could do it once a day or once a week. I can't really remember, but we had a little store at the school that you could spend your merits on. And they always had a thing that for 500 merits you could buy a day off school. So me and Jacob would really focus on how to memorize these scriptures so we could buy days off school, and we would take the whole week of deer season off. That was what we did every single year. Our uncle always had a deer camp, and our mom would let us spend pretty much the whole week at camp with him. Johnny McGee was I didn't miss him. He was like my grandpa. But it was just a lot of my memories with my Uncle Gary, especially Johnny McGee, was deer season. And it's funny because I think about it now, and as your kid you don't think about it, but there's so many scriptures that I learned because of that reason. And I never really thought about that being a part of my life come some point. But then, as I became a teenager, like most teenagers, it was just kind of I wanted to do me, and I thought, what I wanted to do was best, and I knew exactly what I needed, so I just kind of went off and was hanging out with friends and hardly ever went to church. And I would say probably at least from the age of 14 to 18, I probably only went to church a handful of times. I really, really got away from church, and when I was 18, I went to church one Wednesday night, and I don't remember why I was there, but I know we was eating, and this guy walked in, and I hadn't seen her in a long time. She had moved away for college, and my cousin, I'd asked him, kind of why she was here, because I knew she'd moved away, and he said that she was back for a little bit, and her and her boyfriend had broke up. Well, it was a little bit after that, a couple days maybe, that I decided to message her and see if she wanted to go on a date or something. And when we started dating, I started going to church again. It wasn't very often, really, just kind of every now and then, but I got my first, I would say, real job when I was 18. I'd done landscaping before. But my Aunt Ruthie had helped me get a job at the Walmart corporate offices in the kitchen. And when I got that job, thinking back now, it really was a blessing because I had to go to work at 5 in the morning. So I just quit talking and hanging out with my friends altogether. And me and Sky had ended up moving to Bentonville, Arkansas, because we both worked there and we didn't really make a whole lot of money, so it just made sense. And we started going to church about every Sunday, and we got to where we didn't want to have to drive all the way back to Missouri, so we started going to a Grace Point Church in Bentonville. And after a few months, I really decided that that just was not the church for me. To me, it wasn't really a church. It was just kind of a concert type thing, and I just didn't enjoy it. So we started going back to church, and I'd say for the next 8 years probably, I went to church on Sunday mornings, and that was about it. Just kind of did what I wanted to do, live my life how I wanted to live. And come about 2019, I had an outdoor store that I had closed, and that closing that store really took a lot out of me. But literally within like a week of the decision of closing that store, we found out that we was gonna have our first kid, Kinsey, and she was born in 2020. And we had decided at that point that we wanted to go to another church that had people our age, kids, because we wanted our kids to grow up in a church with other kids. And that's when we had ended up going to Pineville. And when I went to Pineville, I had started to notice God in church in a different way than I ever had before. There was a lot more people that were willing to sit down and explain it. Dennis was a big one. I know for many months we met every Thursday and gave boxes of food to people. We'd sit there for hours and hours and hours and just talk. And, thinking back now, things like that really helped me a lot. And then when we had decided to move away from Pineville and we started Elk River, that's when I first really got to the point where I was sitting down and reading my Bible. Because there were so many things I wanted answers for, and I knew the only way to get it was the Bible. So I just started reading and reading and reading. I started growing a lot closer to God through that time. And I would say that started going really well. But then there was a time when we started going to conventions again. And we was gone like 9 weekends out of 13 or 14 weekends. And throughout the whole time, I never read my Bible because it was just go, 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 go. I'll go back a little bit to when we found out we was having another kid. That's when I really realized that I needed to become a better man. I needed to figure out what God was wanting me to do. And through starting this church, I started reading my Bible a lot more, but then come December, it had started to hit me that, I think church is one of these days, I don't know how, but it's going to be my life. And then God started telling me that I needed to be in ministry. And I had kind of had this thought a few times in the past that I could be a preacher, but it was just, to me, it was one of those things that I kind of thought about. I didn't think God was actually calling me to do it, but it got to a point where it's like all I could think about. And then we did a Bible study at the fire department one day. And most of you know Mikey Lake. He was leading the Bible study, and I got to talking about him, and I was just like, if he can do this, I can do this. And that's when I started talking to him about, different colleges he had heard about, and I just started Googling colleges and reading about them. And I found one, and that's when I started taking classes, and now I'm going to school again, and, I've given my life to be in ministry. Kind of what I'm getting at with all of this is, I grew up in church. I learned a lot about God. I knew who God was. I knew who Jesus was. I knew I was saved. I knew that, only by the grace of Jesus that I was saved. I knew all that, but that's the way I grew up, so I just kind of took it for what, it was just kind of one of those things that didn't really register me at the time. I just took it for advantage and never really thought about it. But when I got to the point when I knew I needed to change something, I knew where I needed to go. Because I could remember everything that I had learned when I was a kid. And the sermon I want to do today, pretty much everybody here knows what it is, but it's about the Prodigal Son. And I read lots and lots and lots and lots of stories, and this is the one that I just kept coming back to. I felt that God was really saying that, this is a story that really resembles mine. It's in Luke chapter 15. And I'm going to kind of read a few verses and then kind of explain what was going on and how, to me, I can see this in myself. And I know everybody in some way can use this story in their own lives. But in Acts chapter 15, verse 11, it says, "And he said, a certain man had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me, and divided it unto them his living. And not many days after the younger son gathered all together, and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with righteous living." So to me, this really resembles me, because I grew up knowing what I needed, and I just took it all for granted, everything that I had. And when I had become older, I just kind of thought that I knew better, and I just wanted to take what I had and go. When I was 17, I ended up moving in with one of my friends, and I lived with him for about a year. And there wasn't really a lot of positive things that I did in that time period. It was just all about making a little bit of money to do what I wanted to do. And that's what we did. And I kind of think this is the same way. I didn't go to the point to, asking my mom and dad to give me everything they had just so I could go live my life. But I take this in a way of how I saw my life at that time, because I wasn't thinking about my family. I wasn't thinking about God. I was just thinking about me. It was a very selfish thing that I was doing. But in verse 14, we go back, it says, "And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in the land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husk that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? And I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of the hired servants." Again, kind of how I just compared this to my life was when I decided to leave my friends. At that point in time, I had nothing. I didn't have a job. Pretty much everything I had at that time fit in the front bench seat of my '88 Chevy that I had. And I drove back to my mom's, and I moved back in with them. And I tried and I tried and I tried to find a job. I'd applied everywhere I could think of, and I just couldn't find a job. And I ended up talking to Aunt Ruthie, and she told me that they were hiring a dishwasher in the kitchen. And I said, okay. I said, I'll apply for it. And honestly, I think that she's the only reason why I got that job, because I had felt that, I can look back now saying God was trying to wake me up. The way I was living my life was being paid back to me because I couldn't find a job. I just couldn't do nothing. And when I finally got that job, it was just awesome, because, that's the first time I'd actually really was making money for myself, and I felt like I was doing something positive. But then, fast forward 12, 13 years, the prodigal son here, he's talking about when he had spent everything he had. It's kind of where I was. I didn't have nothing left, and I was looking for a job. That's what he was doing, and he ended up feeding swine. And the Jews then, swine were absolutely forbidden for Jews to have anything to do with them, let alone to be living with them and feeding them and take care of them. To the point to, he was thinking about eating pig feed, because he literally had nothing. And, I think back at that, and, I wasn't to that point because I had lots of people that loved me and they helped take care of me, especially my mom. Then it talks about, when he was thinking about the servants that was at home. And, they have everything they want, or everything they need. They have food, they have shelter, and here he is with nothing. He went from, these servants working for his dad, and, they were way below him. And he just kind of threw all that aside to go live by himself. To live it up is what he thought. But then, as it here, he's talking about, the servants having food. And now he has the idea that I'm going to go back to my father and ask my father just to, take me as a servant. Let me work for you as a servant. Because he's not even thinking in his mind that my father would ever forgive me for the things I've done. That was not even a thought in his head. He just, if my father will let me work for him, at least I can eat. So he has this idea that he's going to go back home, talk to his dad. So in verse 20 it says, "And he arose and came to his father, but when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servant, Bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet. And bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this was my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost and is found, and they began to be merry." So, that is really how I see myself now. There came a point to where, I was coming back to church, and I was talking to God, but I never thought that God would, not only could use me, but would want to. And it's kind of like the prodigal son here was thinking. He was thinking, there's no way my father would ever forgive me. But if he could just let me work for him, I'll come back and I'll be able to eat. And that's what he was hoping for. It never thought in his mind that his father would be waiting for him and looking for him to return. I'm not sure exactly the time frame on this was, but I'm sure it was a few years. I'm just guessing. And, when he came over the hill, I'm sure he had his head down low, felt it the lowest any human body could ever feel. And before he could even get to his dad took off running and gave him a hug.
That's right.
And welcomed him home. And I believe for anybody that maybe has lived a life like I did, that knew what was right but turned away anyways, and you think that you can't come back, Jesus is waiting for you just like the prodigal son's father was waiting for him.
That's right.
Jesus doesn't matter what we did, because the father didn't ask his son, where's the inheritance? What have you been doing? Where were you? He didn't ask any of that. He just ran up, gave him a big hug, and gave him a kiss, and welcomed him back. And that's just really how I feel Jesus is for all of us. I mean, he's waiting for us. It doesn't matter what we've done. There's so many people that think that, I've done these things that I need to clean myself up before I can pray or come to God or come to church. And that's just not true. Jesus is sitting here. He's waiting for us. He wants us to take the first step. And he's going to meet us. He's not going to wait for us to get all the way to him. But once we make that first step, he's going to meet us.
That's right.
Just like the dad did here with his son. And that's kind of, the gist of my message that I had tonight. I just, for some reason, this story was really in my mind of how it kind of intertwined with what I had done. Now I don't know exactly the date, but I know I'm a little over 2 years sober now. And it's not even a thing I think about anymore. I'm here to live for God and do whatever he wants me to do. And I just try my best to do what I can. I do have a closing scripture in Acts chapter 5, verses 40 through 42. And this is just this is how I want to be able to live my life. I know every day everybody struggles with many different things, but I want to be able to say this is how I live my life. So in Acts chapter 5, the apostles had been taken and they were in front of the Sadducees and the Pharisees. In verse 40 it says, "And to him they agreed, and when they had called the apostles and beaten them, they commanded that they should not speak in the name of Jesus and let them go. It says, and they departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for his name. And daily in the temple and in every house they ceased not to teach and preach Jesus Christ. So I don't know if anybody noticed or has ever seen, but I've really tried to build a ministry on social media, because social media is a very, very dark place, and you have no idea who's coming at you from where. But I can say that I've, especially because I'm part of the trapping world too, I get death threats constantly. I've had the game warden call my phone before over things that people in Europe have called him about. And, you know, I'm not going to let that scare me. I'm not going to let people say what they want to say. They want to, you know, use God's name in vain, thinking they're going to make me angry. I just try to kill them with kindness. And, you know, I just want to be able to say that I can rejoice that I was worthy to suffer shame.
That's right.
To his name. I appreciate everybody that came. I hope you guys got something out of my message. Like I said, it's my first one like this, so I hope it was good. And I appreciate you guys.
It was good.